Today, gas, one policy to rule them all. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one that is post covering finance and property news. Well, amazed though I am, it appears the LNP has one policy which is so critical that it could or should in theory win the election. I'm talking about the gas reverse tariffs recently announced. It's worth remembering that while East Coast Australia has doubled its gas production over the past decade, the domestic market has been supplied with 25% less gas. This has driven energy prices to new heights as electricity is priced off the marginal price of gas, which of course is at international rates. I made a show about this recently. The tripling of prices has caused manufacturers to shutter and has also reduced consumption, has put a lot of pressure on households. And the only answer from the government is to give energy subsidies, which of course goes directly back to the gas producers. As a result, despite being a major exporter, East Coast Australia now faces shortages of gas at home and the prospect of importing LNG. Import terminals are planned to commence operations from the end of the year, beginning in Port Kembla and then in Victoria and South Australia. If these LNG terminals open, the East Coast gas price will shoot up to import parity prices for around maybe $20 a gigajoule, up from around $12 currently. As a consequence, electricity prices will also shoot up, reflecting gas's key firming role, which has made it a marginal price setter for electricity. But now Liberal leader Peter Dutton launched the East Coast Gas Reservation, which promises to deliver $10 a gigajoule gas by requiring uncontracted spot gas to be directed into the domestic market. Labour, of course, responds, no, that's not a reservation at all. Peter Dutton says the coalition's gas policy, forcing LNG exporters to increase onshore supply and decoupling local prices from overseas markets, will reduce wholesale prices by around 23%, slash industrial retail gas bills by 15%, and cut 7% from household costs. Frontier Economics modelling released by the opposition leader on Tuesday night claimed his national gas plan, headlined by an East Coast reservation scheme, would immediately apply downward pressure on domestic prices and progressively lower gas and electricity bills. According to the Australian, under the gas reservation plan, East Coast producers will be slugged with a $400 million levy in the first year, which would only be rebated if they supplied up to 100 petajoules of gas into the domestic market at a price below $10. The levy would cover the gap between a $10 domestic price and what is known as an LNG net back price, which is the price at which a Queensland LNG exporter would switch from turning gas into LNG and exporting it to Japan and Korea, alternatively selling surplus gas into the domestic market. This is an export levy, and this policy would eliminate the need to import LNG. And here I want to highlight that Shell Australia chair Cecile Wake begrudgingly admitted that the coalition's gas reservation policy would indeed drive down gas prices. Wake said that the policy would potentially push more supply into the market than there is actual demand. And when that happens, it has the effect of potentially driving prices even lower than the $10 a gigajoule. So if that's not a ringing endorsement of the coalition's reservation policy, well, I don't know what is. By the way, the coalition also promised to invest $1 billion into a critical gas infrastructure fund to increase gas pipeline and storage capacity. Extra pipeline capacity and or storage is actually vital to ensure flows of gas into Victoria during the peak winter months where the north-south pipeline operates at capacity. But of course the question is, will this policy ever see the light of day, as Donald Trump appears to have handed the election to elbow? Treasurer Jim Chalmers could of course take up the policy. Had he done so, Australians would have cruised out of COVID with the lowest inflation in the OECD, a budget windfall of more than $15 billion, and if coupled with lower immigration, would have raised living standards. And it's worth remembering that without this policy, the alternative is indeed LNG imports, starting later in the year, and a freshly re-elected Albo will oversee a new energy shock, just as the world plunges into recession. Now, it's worth saying that weak global growth may prevent it from becoming a macro-scale shock if oil and gas fall enough to offset the weak Aussie dollar, but prices will still rise as energy rebates roll off. And if you want to see the full horror, while East Coast Australians face crippling shortages and soaring gas costs, despite exporting nearly 3/4 of its gas, Japan is busy importing far more Australian gas than it needs and then is reselling it for profit into other Asian nations. So it's worth noting that a Tokyo-based think tank has warned that Peter Dutton's implementation of a gas reservation policy would harm Japanese profits. Huge investment was made on the expectation Australian producers and the Japanese partners could generate revenue from long-term contracts, but also revenue from selling into the spot market. If the idea is to restrict the freedom of selling in the spot market, that would affect the profitability of these projects. Our policies to expand our LNG network for Asia and Australian gas assist in this. The strategy has also proved hugely profitable for Japanese trading houses such as JERA, Mitsubishi, Tokyo Gas, and Mitsui, all of whom buy gas wholesale from Australia, as well as the US and Qatar. Since 2020, actually Japan has sold more LNG overseas than it's imported from Australia. And Japan's own LNG demand has fallen in recent years as nuclear and renewable energy gained weight in the country's energy mix. Which, of course, then begs the question, why should the profits of Japanese trading houses take precedence over the interests of Australian residential and industrial consumers? But it's interesting that The Guardian was ready to find fault with the plan. A leading energy expert, they say, has warned the coalition's plan to charge gas exporters a levy to force them to sell more to the domestic market could backfire and force local prices up instead of down. While several experts and the gas industry said the policy was light on detail, the report revealed the coalition intended to impose a levy on gas that was not tied to long-term export contracts. That levy would make it uneconomical for producers to sell that gas overseas. They say producers would also be told how much gas they should sell domestically. If they met that target, then they'd have the levy refunded. Professor Bruce Mountain, director of the Victorian Energy Policy Centre, said there is a non-trivial possibility here that if the coalition constrains exports in this way, local prices will rise because the gas producers will choose not to produce gas. Of course, the cartel will attempt to slow production to bully the nation, but that's what the levy is about. It is, if you like, a counter-bullying tactic to prevent it. If production is cut, Dutton can simply raise the levy. If the producers eventually want to default on export contracts, that's up to them. Simply pointing out that we might get bullied by a cartel in a former market that failed 10 years ago is not current analysis. We know it's a cartel. This is what the policy is designed to break. But also worth noting that Tony Wood from the Grattan Institute, who is, I think, probably gas cartel sponsored and who previously worked in the gas industry, said the policy was, quote, hugely interventionist and could have, quote, unintended consequences. Unintended consequences like the formation of a gas export cartel that Tony Wood recommended back in 2013, which has since gutted household income, destroyed the energy transition and killed 5 prime ministers. And where's the analysis on the counterfactual? Without more local gas, we will have to import LNG. Victoria has sought a national rule change for gas storage to help avoid a system black outage that would cripple households and businesses, risking a potential $1.6 billion economic hit. State Energy Minister Lee D'Ambrosio has written to the nation ruler maker asking for a 3-year extension to the gas rules to allow the Australian energy market operator to continue tapping into the Dandenong LNG storage facility to sidestep a gas squeeze. With steep gas declines from Victoria's ageing Bass Strait, supply shortages are set to hit during peak winter demand, with industrial users in the southern states most exposed. Accessing the LNG reserve would boost the power grid's operator's ability to avoid the small risk of a system black type event and avert the potential curtailment of the gas market. The bottom line is this: Australian gas must be reserved for Australians first. Otherwise, Australians will continue to face surging gas and electricity costs, higher inflation, further deindustrialisation, lower productivity growth, and declining living standards. It's at the heart of everything that Australia is. And therefore, for this policy alone, a key to future prosperity, LNP wins. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.